You might not even want to deal with the person again, right, after being cheated on. Why do people think it's going to take just 2 seconds for communities to rebuild trust?
There's no reason for competition.
Hello, and welcome to Critters and Cultures, the podcast where we explore the fascinating intersection of animal welfare and cultural diversity. I'm your host and veterinarian, Dr. Azalia Boyd, ready to uncover how our cultural differences influence, enhance, and sometimes challenge the way we care for animals, and let's be honest, relate to each other. Join us on this journey through global traditions, learning from diverse perspectives, and advocating for empathy and respect in all of our interactions. This episode is made possible thanks to two sponsors today. This episode first is made possible by Maddie's Fund, championing a more inclusive, innovative, and compassionate worlds for pets. So I will always say hashtag thanks to Maddie's. This episode is also brought to you by our community partner, the BIPOC and Animal Wellbeing Collective, a community of healing, support, and connection for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in the animal welfare space. You can find more about the collective in our show notes. Thank you all so much for joining us on another episode of Critters and Cultures. If something resonates with you during the podcast today, please feel free to send me a direct message or you can comment below. On this episode of Critters and Cultures, I am so excited to introduce and have this conversation with Mr. Rousseau Durocher. Rousseau is a Haitian-American animal welfare professional whose journey from temp staff to intake supervisor at Broward County Animal Care is more than a story of professional growth, truly a story of resilience, cultural navigations, and radical compassion. Today, Rousseau brings a vital perspective that often goes unseen in the industry. He's not just educating the public about animal care, he's doing the work of cultural repair, walking door to door in community neighborhoods, and confronting the stigma that often surrounds animal services, as well as representing people who always haven't felt seen in the field. Rousseau, thank you so much for being on the Critters and Cultures podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Just got excited to be here.
Listen, it's time. I think we rescheduled this like 3 times already. Maybe not that much, but I'm glad that we're getting it done today.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm excited.
So let me just jump right in. So the first thing that I typically do is I will ask an icebreaker question. Okay. So you're not prepared for really any of the questions today, but this one in particular is an icebreaker and it gives the listeners and viewers a chance to get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. So your icebreaker question is, if you could come back in another lifetime as an animal, which animal would that be and why?
That's a tough one. I would say a lion because, of course, they are the king of the jungle. They're on top of the food chain, and most time people leave them alone and let them be free and let them do their thing out in the wild without human intervention.
You're like, yeah, I'm the man. I'm the man right now. Just leave me
Yeah.
alone. Nobody bother me, right? And I
Yeah,
think it feels
you're
like,
respected enough. Having the insight of, working in this field and having so much things against you from the dog and the cat perspective, a lion is different as you're out in the wild. People understand your nature. You're not going to have a lot of people coming out there and interfering with your way of life. And, in that aspect, I would like to be a lion, definitely. Just be free.
all right, oh, I like the leader. That speaks to the leader in you. So let me ask you this. Tell me about what you do right now, because you're in the animal welfare industry and you're in sheltering, right?
Yes.
What is your actual position right now?
Currently, I'm the intake supervisor, and I have the responsibilities of running the whole admissions intake process. I'm also supervise the alternate placement team, which is community cats, our transfer team, which we work with rescues, Humane Society, trying to get pets out of the shelter. Our alternate placement team also has a fostering team there where we do a lot of fosterings into the community. So it's kind of, to sum it all up, I would say intake to placement kind of position
Mm.
where you're seeing the animals come in and you're trying to fast track them outside of the shelter the best you can.
That sounds like a lot of intense work, and it sounds like a lot of management of staff and expectations of the community is what it sounds like. So me, like both of us are in the animal world, me as a veterinarian, normally what I see are people that either, don't unfortunately have the resources to spend thousands of dollars on their pets, decide that they, adopted a pet, but they don't want a pet anymore, pets that are really sick because they haven't been properly vaccinated, those sort of things. But there's definitely a connection between what I do and what I see on my end and what you do and what you see on your end. Once they leave the clinic and decide that they, let's just say for example, for a lack of resources, then a lot of times what happens is they'll end up on the sheltering door, right? And so you manage people that come in and you deal with the families of those that come in and have to surrender their dog. Is that what intake is?
Yes, that's definitely an aspect of it. But intake, we are dealing with every single animal coming into the shelter, whether it's somebody who wants to own or surrender their dog because they can't, like you said, don't have the means to get medical care for them. They've been evicted, they're
Yeah.
homeless, to aspects where the stray animals, stray dog running around, somebody wants to do the right thing, the animal bring them to the shelter, community cat. So any kind of pets coming through the shelter, dealing with that firsthand.
We are on the Critters and Cultures podcast, and I asked you to be a guest through a connection. Someone told me, like, you do amazing work. He's an amazing person. I was like, okay. And we talked a little bit about your background, and we'll get into that because I do want to know more about your story, your journey, and how you got here. But what do you see as probably the most challenging kind of, dilemma that you encounter when you're dealing with intake from the community?
It's a lot. I would say top three
Yeah.
is the misperception of county shelter. I think every shelter gets that reputation where you're a county shelter, they don't want to drop animals off because they think the worst will happen. So a lot of people think the worst of us, and I think that's where I drive to kind of change people's perception and get them to understand why we're here, how we serve the community, the resources that we have, and try to change people's understanding and perception of us so we can work together as a community. Because I think a shelter that don't have the backing of the community, it's a struggle.
I know you have two other challenges. We'll get into that, but I want to dive into that some more. So, most people's perceptions of the shelter, like when I was growing up, my perception of the shelter was like, oh my goodness, this is where they're going to kill animals. What do you want people to know about the sheltering if it's not that?
I think most government shelters in the country are striving to do better every day. I've been in the industry for 15 years and it's day and night. When I first started working till now, there's a lot more programs. There's a lot more things trying to keep animals out the shelter and at the same time trying to get animals out of the shelter. But shelters are always going to be too small. Of course, you in the urban areas, metropolitan areas, it's a struggle because you have so much animals and not enough place to house them and not enough homes for them to go to, which puts a lot of pressure on shelters to have to make decisions, to have to put policies and try to get creative with how can we keep animals out? How can we get them into homes and keep them there? So I think every day is a challenge for anybody in this industry.
I heard a friend of mine say that sheltering, industry of animal welfare and sheltering just harms themselves because they gatekeep who gets to adopt out animals. And so there's so many animals in the shelter and we want to get them to homes, but at the same time, there's this rigorous process that people have to go through. And I've heard people say multiple times before, like, oh, I want a dog. And I went to the shelter and they told me, no, I couldn't have a dog, whether it's because I didn't have a fence or I don't know what was wrong with my application. What would you say about that?
In my experience, again, from when I started 15 years ago, we used to do welfare checks. We used to do check with the landlord. We used to have a lot of boxes you had to check to adopt a dog or cat. I think that wasn't fair because you can't judge somebody by what they have or what they don't have on how they're going to be a responsible pet owner. I deal
Right.
with people that are homeless, displaced, and honestly, those are the people that are heavily committed to their pets. But now where I am in my career, there's a lot of barriers been removed to where we're not doing welfare check based on just somebody coming in and, just somebody's look, somebody's opinion of somebody. That's the reason you're not going to get a dog or something like that. As long as you can adopt a dog, you can, so that it's a hard situation, but you want to remove the barriers based on it's an opinion of somebody. You're not going to collect any fact from somebody in an adoption process. You're giving you
Right.
information, and if we're going to judge somebody if they can adopt a dog on how they look or where they live, what area they live, our shelters will remain full, and we're going to be in a more complicated situation than yesterday.
It sounds like a cycle too. It's like, okay, we're taking the dogs out of communities, off the streets, putting them in the shelter, waiting for an adoption to happen. Then it's almost like a horrible cycle. But I will call out that I do hear what you're saying, which I think is important. And I do think that the animal welfare industry deserves a moment of accolades just for recognizing that there's things that need to change and then deciding on making those changes. So like you started 15 years ago. It's not the same now. And it sounds like it's more progressive. It's less judgmental, which is hard. It's hard to train staff and people who are typically so for the animal that they forget about the people that are attached to the animal. They're just thinking solely about the animal. And when you do that, you're missing the people that are attached. And so the cycle just continues and the shelters will always be full,
Yeah.
What about your cultural background? Because I think you're passionate about your work based on the lens in which you view the world. And so as a Haitian American, were you always into animals? Was this always something that you wanted to do?
No, I'm just being straight up honest.
Yeah,
I tell people when
right,
people
right.
kind of, I give people my background, I tell them that the industry picked me. Just a little backspin,
Okay.
just to answer your question. I ended up in this industry as a temp worker. I was about 18, 19, doing temp jobs, 3 weeks here, 2 weeks here. They would call me when they have something.
And all sorts of
Yeah, all
jobs,
sorts of
like
jobs.
animal jobs. Okay,
Warehouse
okay, uh-huh.
jobs. One job I really wasn't doing anything but moving mats around all day. But
Okay,
that a
wow.
job ended like about 2 weeks. They called me like, hey, we have a request. And of course I took it because I needed the money. I was sent to an animal shelter. I always say my first dog was my neighbor's dog. I remember my neighbor had a boxer named Tyson, and he was super friendly, would come out, we would play with him. My mom wouldn't let us have dogs. My mom was a single mom raising 4 kids, so didn't have the means to have a pet. But we would walk Tyson, knock on the door, hey, can we walk Tyson? We'll take him out to the field, let him run, play ball with him. So that technically I was thinking of him as my first dog. But yeah, so I went to the job thinking I'm going to be there for a couple weeks. That temp assignment I think lasted 2.5 years, and eventually they ended the contract with the company. They had to let me go, and about a month later they had an opening as a vet tech, part-time vet tech, and I applied, and from there
Okay.
I just been there.
Prior to you being a vet tech there, what was your temp position?
I was working in the kennels.
Okay, okay. So you're working in the kennel. So from kennels to vet tech, and then duties in between, job titles changes to now
Yeah,
intake supervisor.
yes.
And so, how do you believe that your Haitian background influenced your desire to work with animals?
Honest answer again, earlier stage, I don't think it had any influence. As I grew in the industry, I understand what was going on, educated myself with how culture affects the industry and how my culture directly is a hurdle for us to get over. That's how I kind of connected to, and that's how I got into community outreach and a lot of other things that just trying to bridge the gap between the community and the industry and the shelters.
Yeah, I think it goes, there are a lot of Black communities. We love animals, and there's the stigma around Black people don't love animals, right? That's still out there. Culturally, you're going to have your outliers, ethnic backgrounds, everyone within these groups. You're not going to have everyone that loves animals, right? That's in all groups, right? But what do you think is the thing that you're trying to bridge? Are you trying to get your community, and are we talking about, when you say your community, are you talking about specifically the Haitian community or just African American community? When you say your community, what does that mean to you?
So I live in Florida, which they call us the melting pot. My community, our community down here is everybody. It can be Spanish, Haitian, Creole, Jamaican. We have it all down here, which makes it even more challenging because you're dealing with so many people with different backgrounds from different heritage, coming from another country. The way they think about having a pet is totally different than how we think about it over here in the States.
Completely. And so you've talked about, when we spoke first, you talked to me about you going door to door in high intake neighborhoods. What have some of those conversations taught you as you're going door to door?
Never take no for an answer. I remember when I started doing outreach, I remember this one individual just walking down the street going door to door. And before I can even step on his lawn, he's just like, nope, keep it going, like wave me, I was like, hey, he just did not want to hear it. I couldn't get a word out of him.
When you're doing outreach, what does that mean? Like you're going out to do what specifically?
So we go into the high intake areas based on statistic where most of our dogs or cats are coming from. And we go in there as a team to go door to door. People in that community know, for example, hi, I'm Russo with Broward County Animal Care. Do you have any pets? Just having a conversation and see if they
Hmm.
want to engage in it. Try to get some information and let them know what resources you have available. Just letting them know we're here. I think having a community feel your presence, letting them know you're here to help them also doesn't just let the people that's in need of help, but also it helps to let people know you're there as a shelter and the word spreads so it can help you with your pet RTO numbers, return to owner numbers, because now this community that has high intake, there's a number of reasons why the dogs are coming from this community. Some people lose their dogs and don't know where to go look for them. But now that people in the community is talking about the shelter, and we're doing vaccine clinics and everybody knows about us, people come looking for their dogs at the shelter or at minimal
Mm,
come there looking for resources or calling to ask questions. Instead of,
mm,
oh, my dog went missing. Okay, I'll wait for him to come back. They're being proactive
mm.
and looking for their dog. So I
Yeah,
think
it's
in
like,
that way it makes a big difference in so much aspects.
yeah. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Thank you for explaining that because some people don't understand what that actually means. So when we're doing outreach, when you say you're doing outreach, you're going into the communities, you're knocking on door to doors and letting people know what resources are available. And I'm assuming, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, people oriented as well as pet oriented resources
Yes. And I'll give
okay,
you an example on what kind of resources. For example, we have went into high intake areas and done free vaccine clinics.
for the dogs or
Yes,
for people.
for pets, dogs and
Okay.
cats. So that helps. We give free microchips, we give them dewormer, all of the vaccines that's needed. And now you have a dog that could possibly had ran astray with no microchip, now has a microchip. It's found by a animal control officer. They can scan and find the owner.
Yeah.
We also have offered food, leases, nothing major, but we also have helped some people treat their animals.
I feel like some of the smallest things, like even you just mentioned, like, hey, do you need a leash, right? Can lead to like that small act of kindness and additional resource for someone who potentially might not have been able to afford a leash can go a long way. I saw an emergency clinic one time, very skinny dog. Also, the owner had no leash. I connected her with a food pantry. So it's good to know that the shelters have the possibilities or capabilities of providing food. And then I also gave her a leash and she was so incredibly grateful. She actually had the dog tied. She made a garbage bag. She had a garbage bag and she just kind of tied it and stretched it and tied it and stretched it in order to make a leash. But we had buckets of leashes to give and she was just so grateful for that.
Just that small act of kindness is building a rapport with somebody. The next time they're in need, they have somebody they can call to, hey, I'm in this situation. Instead of facing it by themselves, they have somebody who have the knowledge and knows how to answer questions and find the resources to connect them with the people. And the outreaches doesn't stop just in the community. We also have done like VA outreach, go out to homeless symposiums where people are
Wow.
displaced and they have pets, but they don't have the means to get the care or even a simple, we have these pop-out bowls where it's mobile, you pop them out, put water. They're priceless to people.
Mm, I love that and I appreciate that so much. So shout out to you. Shout out to Broward County Animal Services for being that and knowing the importance of community building and community trust building, I should say. A little while ago, you were going to tell a story though about this guy that was saying no to you on the porch. I wanted to go back to that in case I was missing something there.
Yeah, so I think this was like the first day I was doing outreach. Like I was saying, he was just, before I can get to his lawn, he was just waving me off. Like, nope, I don't want to talk. Like, didn't want to hear it. And, I respected it, kept it moving. And I think it was like the third week of us doing outreach. And we would come up. I think one of his neighbors asked for some cat food because he had some outside cats. And we gave him some cat food. And that same day, because we were consistently there, he actually
Mhm.
came out to the street and he was like, "Hey, you got some cat food or you got that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I got you." Gave it to him. He was happy. Asked for some wet cat food. Took care of him, and I took that opportunity to, "Hey, you want to get you got some outside cats? You want to get them spayed?" And he was like, "No, I don't want to get them spayed." And so I was, you don't want to be too pussy. You want to take what they give you and try to work from there. And about 2 weeks later, one of the cats gave birth, and he caught us, and she wasn't doing too good. So I told him, "Hey, like, let me help you. Like, we'll take the cat in. We'll take a look at it." We were also transparent. We have to let him know the possibilities of things happening, but he wanted to get the help. We spayed the mom, it went well. We spayed the kittens, it went well. From somebody telling you no, didn't even want to hear anything from you, just building the rapport, we were able to get his cat spayed and get his kitten spayed. And I think that was a big success, and that was a win for me. It taught me to don't give up on people. Even though
Mhm.
initially, they don't want to hear it. They think you're selling something. Don't give up on people and give them time to come to you. You just got to be consistent.
Yeah, I love that story and definitely kudos to you. When I talk about community trust building, That's a perfect example. It's like someone who likely has already been harmed by people walking up on his door or people just already being policed potentially in his neighborhood, right? He's going to say no. But it's like we've done harm. The systems have previously done harm to so many communities that it's actually going to take time to rebuild that trust again, right? How I explain it is like if you've been cheated on before, you are not going to just jump right back into that relationship because that relationship, it lost trust and it did harm. It's going to take time to rebuild that trust, even if you might not even want to deal with the person again, right? After being cheated on. So I always use
Yeah.
it as like, why do people think it's going to take just 2 seconds for communities to rebuild trust in organizations and systems that have harmed them in the past? It actually takes time, right, to rebuild that trust. So it just takes time. From your background being Haitian or having a Haitian American background, or you might call yourself Haitian, do you speak French?
I speak Creole, very little French. That's one thing I'm upset my mom didn't teach me.
Man,
Yeah, but
it's all good. It should be easy for you. If you have the Creole down, it should just be easy for you to jump right
not,
into it.
nah. I remember this one particular time I thought I could, Creole. They wanted me to translate, and I went and I
Oh
understood the
no,
first three words, and I was like, I don't know what they're saying.
that's not me.
You know, so
Okay. Well, I want to ask you because I don't love talking about politics, so I won't touch it politically. But um, there was a time a few years ago where President Trump made incredibly harmful statements and comments about Haitians. This episode of Critters and Cultures is brought to you by Maddie's Fund, a family foundation that believes in a world where every pet has a loving home and every family has the support they need to stay together. Inspired by a beloved miniature schnauzer named Maddie, the fund is transforming animal welfare through innovation, education, and equity. Whether it's funding groundbreaking foster programs, supporting community collaboration grants, or offering free online learning for animal care professionals, Maddie's Fund is investing in the people and the ideas that move us forward. They also believe that inclusion matters because real change happens when we uplift every voice in this work. Learn more, get involved, or start learning today at maddiesfund.org. That's MADDIESFUND.org. And I will always say thanks to Maddie's. I also am going to thank the BIPOC and Animal Wellbeing Collective. So many individuals identify as Black and Indigenous people of color in this space of animal welfare and veterinary medicine. And the collective is, for short, they call themselves the collective. The collective is a community of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color connected through the care, work, and advocacy in the animal well-being space. The collective creates opportunities for healing, for support, and connection through weekly support calls, collaborative small groups, and a private message space where members can connect, share resources, and support each other in real time. I'm also a part of the collective, so shameless plug there, an amazing organization. To learn more about joining the community, offering support, or finding support yourself, you can visit bipoccollective.com. That's BIPOC collective.com. There
yes.
was a moment a few years ago that shook a lot of communities when President Trump made harmful comments about Haitians, including saying they eat dogs. I remember how heavy that felt for me. And I'm wondering, as someone who is Haitian American and who literally works in animal welfare, how did that land for you? Did you feel an effect or ripple effects in your work, in the community, any of that?
I try not to focus on that stuff, honestly. I know people were upset. I try not to. I have mastered blocking out the noise and focusing on goals and things that will push us forward as a country, state, community, that all of the above. I try to focus on those things, on united and everybody.
And I appreciate that answer too. Where we are in the country right now is very polarizing and divisive. I'm really good at actually blocking out some of the stuff too. And people are like, you don't care about this? And it's like, no, I do care. But in order to protect my peace and in order to keep showing up and in order to keep doing the work, I don't have the space for it, you
Yeah.
know? So I appreciate you sharing that with us. So let me ask you about your leadership. What does leadership mean to you now? And who are you mentoring?
Leadership, I think it's always, once you're in a leadership role, you're always learning, you're always growing, you're learning how to deal with challenging issues, trying to understand your staff, trying to get the best out of them. But you also have to balance that with the vision or the shelter agenda, the mission, the goal in mind.
Mm.
One thing I have noticed, and that's from overall my career in this industry, change is guaranteed. And change is something that's scary for a lot of people, especially when you have a lot of turnover. It means you have a lot of people who's coming in, different perspectives, different expectations, and it takes time to train them, have them understand, and for them to build their perspective of where we are as a shelter or community. But I would say my leadership style is trying to stay motivated, trying to motivate my staff, trying to remove their biases and not being judgmental of people. I have a thing with my staff where I tell them everything's not black and white. Once you deal with a customer, hit the reset button before you deal with the next customer, because this one customer could have gave you a hard time and didn't want to understand, and sometimes that some frustration may set in, and then you go to the next customer and you kind of approach them with the energy from the last customer, which isn't fair to the customer that you're serving now. I think everybody deserves a fresh start and to be communicated and served with respect.
That is very deep one, because just mentioning, removing people's bias, it's like first thing I'm thinking of is like getting them to see their bias. Like, hey, you actually do have biases. We all have biases. We have to acknowledge them, check them, and take them out of the way. But I've never heard anyone say push the reset button every time we're dealing with the client or a community member, because we start to build up all of these judgments or have all of these attitudes based on past experiences. Our body naturally does that, but everybody is an individual. And I think that that is a beautiful way that I'm probably going to use and acknowledge you for that, but use that moving forward. It's like reset every single time. Let me ask you, what keeps you going when the system feels overwhelming?
A lot of things. Over the last 6 years, I think I've accepted that I'm kind of a workaholic. Anything that I'm passionate about, I will go over and beyond to accomplish things and set goals for myself to accomplish things. What keeps me going is my number one goal is whenever I walk away from this industry, I think I will be in this industry probably till I get closer to retirement, hopefully early retirement. But I don't think I'll ever walk away. Even if I was supposed to retire today, I would get with organizations. I would definitely do volunteer and do things on my free time to see how I can continue to help the industry. What keeps me going is the positive stories, stuff that makes you feel good about what you're doing. You can't focus on the negatives. Unfortunately, every day you're going to have at least one negative. Dealing with like enforcement, you have hoarding cases, you have some situation where you want to find a solution for somebody's problem and you really don't have it. And, like I said, you build a rapport with some people where they start trusting you. And sometimes they hit you with a problem that you can't solve. And you can't focus on that. You have to focus on the good so you can keep moving and keep falling forward.
Yeah. And what about mentorship? Are you a mentor right now?
I have staff that I work close with.
Yeah, I envision that young boys who look like you in this leadership role, doing the work that you're doing, supporting animals, supporting the community. I envision that that is something that a lot that they don't get to see as much. And that's another part of your work that you're doing silently without maybe even realizing that it's happening when it's happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. I started applying the 80/20 rule maybe in the last year. 80/20 rule is I learned as I, get a little older and I have more knowledge that I'm committed to everybody, but I want to mentor people who want it, who's passionate. I want to spark their fire because I learned this Kenny Lamberti. It only takes the one person. You have to spark that one person to spark another person. Eventually they will spark that one spark that you started will spark 5, 10 more people, and we start multiplying from there.
That's so good. That's so, so, so good. Thank you so much, Russo. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years within the industry? You said you want to stay until retirement. And I love the fact of early retirement and then volunteering and still giving back to communities and to animals. But where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Definitely moving up to hope a senior level. Right now, as a supervisor, I do have my hopes that I can become a manager somewhere in the shelter. I'm very diverse in the shelter. I basically almost work everywhere in the shelter. Medical, I work with field, I work with kennel. So I'm one of those people who can kind of want to move around in the shelter and fix things. So I'm the firefighter. So where we can send me where the problems are, let me solve them and just bring everything full circle as a shelter. Because I think if we are able to get 100%, meaning internal efficiency, I think the community, the public perception becomes more positive. And when that becomes positive, then you have more support for your shelter and your shelter workers, and everybody becomes one, and it just makes us unstoppable.
What's one thing that you wish, if you had to say one thing that you want shelters to change starting today?
I think one of the biggest things industry is the public shelters, the private shelters, they're not always in line with each other. And it's always been crazy to me because we're doing the same work with different policies and different rules. And I think if we can align ourselves together to do the work, again, it just makes us more effective working as one instead of working not in line with each other. I think that's the biggest thing. Of course, there's a lot more, but I think that's the biggest thing that can make a difference.
Collaboration over
Yes.
competition.
There's no reason for competition. We're all in
Yeah.
the same boat, different engine.
We're all in the same boat. Russo, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I really appreciate your insights. I loved actually hearing about your journey. I think just you being in the field as a Black male, as a Haitian American male, speaks volumes to how you can connect with the community, how you connect with the youth. I love the fact that you did not start off this whole thing being an animal person, or well, you were an animal person, you had your neighbor, but you didn't have animals in the house. And all of a sudden, this temp job led into something so incredible for you. And I'm sure you have so many great stories to tell. I know the bad ones are in there, but you've gave us this confidence and this peace about focusing our energy on the good things that are happening and continue to focus the energy on the good things that are happening so that it can multiply. So that is for sure what I got out of you today. And it's helped me on a personal level as well as a professional level. So I appreciate you joining the podcast. So before we close, I ask each guest to leave a piece of cultural relevance, something meaningful from your life, your identity, or your heritage that someone out there might carry with them. It could be a tradition, a proverb, a memory, a favorite dish, or even a value that grounds you. You've given us a lot today. Let me just say that. But what's something that you'd like to offer as a cultural gift to our listeners and to our viewers and to whoever comes next on this journey?
A quote that has stuck with me ever since it was sent to me by a veterinarian, Dr. Guzman, that I worked with for some years. When she left, she sent out an email, her last email, I think it was.
Mm.
And the quote was from Martin Luther King Jr. And the quote goes, "Never, never be afraid to do what's right, especially if the well being of a person or an animal is at stake. Society's punishment are small compared to the wounds we inflict on our soul when we look the other way." And that's something that has stuck with me, and it helps me when I'm faced with challenging decisions or breaking pre-existing things that I had growing up. I think that has pushed me and doing the right thing, helping me be confident in my decisions in my personal life, my career. I think that's something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life.
Wow, that is extremely powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope the listeners and viewers were able to take something from that. Russo, thank you so much. Thank you for joining the podcast today. And thank you guys for joining us on another episode of Critters and Cultures, where we explore the deep connections between humans, animals, and the world around us. Remember, every person has a story, every creature has a story, and every culture has its wisdom. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep discovering the wonders of our shared world. Thank you.